So stick around for a minute and I'll show you how I built these killer custom rollout cabinets that store easily underneath the lathe when not in use. Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Although I've had a lathe in my shop for many years, I really do consider myself a novice turner. I built this corner cabinet years ago with intentions of getting more into turning and just never got around to it. When I added this new lathe, I quickly learned that the corner cabinet was just not the complete answer. I found myself using the shop card as well as the horizontal surfaces on my planer to store things while turning. I needed a better solution. I set out in SketchUp to design a cabinet that would fit my needs. This first drawing initially seemed like it would fit the bill. I pondered this idea for a while and decided that it was just too big and awkward, so would most likely not get used as intended. Since I found myself using both the right and left side of the lathe, I thought two cabinets would be a better solution that would easily store underneath the lathe when not in use. This is shop furniture, so no fancy joinery. Glue and screws are just fine. I did use Baltic birch for the cabinets and added some inexpensive rustic walnut for the accents to match the rest of the shop. For what it's worth, rustic just means the boards are pretty rough with a lot of defects, but the cost is greatly reduced. I started by breaking down the ply with the track saw, and we'll talk more about that rustic stuff in just a minute. I then added rabbets at the table saw for the sides to nest into, as well as one in the back for the back panel. I was able to complete both cabinets with one sheet of 3/4 inch Baltic birch and 2 sheets of 1/2 inch Baltic birch. I glued and pin nailed everything together and then came back in and added the screws. Lathe tools can get pretty heavy, so I wanted some beefy cabinets to store everything in that I knew would hold up over time. So here is one of my lovely rustic boards. I managed to get all of the front trim for both cabinets out of this one board. Normal milling, and then I cut all these to 3/4 by 3/4 strips at the table saw, and I just glued these onto the case. That'll be plenty strong for this cabinet. So next up was all the drawer parts, and there were a lot of them. There are 5 drawers in one cabinet and 3 deeper drawers in the other cabinet. I'm using all 1/2 inch Baltic birch ply to include the drawer bottoms, which were rabbeted into the bottoms of the drawers since I'll be using side glides on this project. Construction for these drawers is fairly simple since it's shop furniture. Glue and pin nails to hold everything in place, and the drawer bottom to ensure the drawer is actually square. I then came back and added the screws just for some added extra strength. Normally I would move on to installing the drawers at this point, but knowing my walnut boards were pretty rough, I went ahead and assessed my material for drawer fronts. I figured I would have to do some glue ups to make the fronts for the deeper drawers, and I didn't want to be waiting for glue to dry. After getting all the rough lengths, I again went through the normal milling process to get the drawer fronts to a rough width. I'll go back and do a final mill once the drawers are installed so that I can dial them in to fit the cabinets nicely. I did get pretty lucky on this one and only had to glue up one drawer front. To install the glides, I cut spacers to locate them properly in the cabinet. I then just shortened these spacers for the next glide down until all the glides were installed. I used a 1/4 inch gap for the bottom glide. The drawer portion of the glide is simply mounted flush with the bottom of the drawer and flush to the front as well. I used a Vicks bit to locate for the screw holes. I wanted to test fit the first drawer before installing the rest of the glides, just to ensure that all my numbers and math had come out correctly before moving on to the rest of them. To install the drawer fronts, I started at the bottom with some 1/8 inch spacers and just eyeballed the side-to-side reveal. I used the handle holes to temporarily install the drawer front and then secured the front permanently from the inside. I left the blue tape on each one so that I could get the drawers open since I didn't have access with the back panel on. After getting everything finish sanded, it was time for a little finish. I'm going with Natura here, which I have not used before. So I wanted to stop for just a second and talk about this Natura one coat finish. This isn't a reed or anything like that. I use different finishes on shop furniture. I have General Finishes hard wax oil, I have Rubio, I have Fitties, I even have some Osmo. There's a lot of different finishes that get used in here, and I write those down so that I can actually talk about these products when people ask me. I get to see how they hold up in a working environment, and so I can hopefully talk a little intelligently. So up front on the Natura, I was blown away at how thick it was. You almost have to scoop it out versus, pour it out. So super thick, not that that's a bad thing. Still applied with the same white Scotch-Brite pad. It feels good. It might not be quite as smooth as Rubio, but it certainly doesn't feel bad. Certainly nothing wrong with that. It did make the grain pop pretty good. It is cheaper than Rubio. A little bit goes a long way, but not quite as far as Rubio. So take all that for what it's worth and do your own testing. So I'm going to get after putting some handles on, putting some wheels on, getting that rolled over, and start deciding what I want to do with some storage organization. Installing the drawer handles is pretty straightforward. I just had to finish the holes all the way through the box using a backer board to ensure that I didn't have any blowout inside the drawer. I went with some smaller 3-inch wheels on these cabinets, and I'm not sure I'm happy with them. The locking mechanism is a little hard to get at, so I may be replacing these wheels in the future. I knew that I had left myself some wiggle room around these cabinets under the lathe and pulled some actual numbers so I could figure out what I wanted to do with tool storage and things when the cabinets were in use. I started with the fold-up shelf that will become the tool tray. The brackets are fairly simple, and I used some scrap ply to ensure the shelf would fold up flush with the top. I have enough room to add one of these to both carts, but the second one hasn't been added yet as I wait for hardware to arrive, and I decide if I want or need another fold-up shelf. I then used a piece of leftover ply, edged out with some scrap walnut, to start laying out how I wanted all the tools organized on the tray when in use. I measured the ferrules and then drilled the holes just a little oversized to hold the tools in the tray. These were all drilled out of the drill press, and some of these tools had an odd shape to them. I slotted the tray so that the tool would slide in and out easily. Parting tools, scrapers, and larger gouges being the ones that I have that needed a little custom fitting. I'm sure there's more to come in my future, but I'll have some room for growth. Next, I used a little more scrap walnut and some CA glue to create a small tray on one end. This tray is directly over the hinge, so that area couldn't be used for through-hole storage anyway. This tray is a great place for center punches and scales and pencils and things of that nature. And after getting the tray attached, I could turn my attention to some drawer organization. There was only one drawer that I absolutely knew what I wanted in that drawer. I use Kaizen foam to inlay those accessories, and I also cut some foam for the other drawers just for use in the future. As I use these carts on projects, I'll learn what I want and where I want it, and then I'll get to the drawer organization, just like I do every place else in the shop. I'm sure this will be in a future video at some point. So there you go, guys, just a couple of quick, fun shop cabinets that greatly improve my efficiency at the lathe. And more importantly, now I have all this extra storage space. When I'm not using them, everything just gets put away and they tuck nicely under the lathe. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you build this project for yourself and leave me some pictures down in the comments below or out on my forums. So until next time, guys. Take care.